The Mariners are coming off of a rough series in Cleveland where they dropped 2 out of their 3 games. Joe and I are going to break down each of those games, what went right and what went wrong for this team, and a lot went wrong. We're then going to talk about how the Mariners trade deadline plans may need to shift a little bit due to some injuries to the starting rotation, and we're going to wrap it all up by talking about the upcoming Miami Marlins series. We're going to see a lot of left-handed pitchers in that. How do the Mariners attack those lefties? Thank you guys so much for watching episode 97 of the Hit It Here podcast, part of the Bleav Network, the Joe Beimel episode of the Hit It Here podcast. And I'm here with a Joe as well. My Joe, how are you?
Yeah, I'm not Joe Beimel. Don't ask me any questions. I will not be answering any. I know he's a reliever. I really don't know anything else beyond that. He's
Had a
left-handed,
great
right?
pickoff move. Yeah, great pickoff
Is
move.
that like what he's known for?
Mm-hmm.
On out of everybody in MLB history, to be a guy known for your pickoff move, there's probably less than 10. Like, the amount of names there, very little. Pretty good betting odds if you were to say, place a bet on Joe Beimel having a good pickoff move his career. So, Bet Online. Thank you to Bet Online for being a sponsor for the Hit It Here podcast. Bet Online is your number one source for all your sports betting needs this season. From baseball and golf and soccer, and even all the top fights in the UFC, MMA, and boxing, Bet Online has you covered. Every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the games are over, though, you can head on over to the online casino and get into a game of blackjack, poker, or even unwind with over 150 different slots games to choose from. Head to the website today to get in on the action and use promo code Bleav, that's BLEAV, for your 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online. The game starts here. I really wish, Colton, the rest of this series had gone like game one. Even though it was a little bit of a heart attack in a game, it was a good game because the Mariners won. And that's what I think really defines a good game of baseball for a lot of people at the end of the day, is the Mariners winning it. 8-5 in this game. Really just attacked Tristan McKenzie, got him out early. We felt good getting to the Guardians bullpen, getting a lot of their arms used up in this first game. 11 hits, scoring 8 runs, even with a not like poor effort runners in scoring position, kind of poor, 4 for 17. 10 left on base. It could have been even more. Mariners could have scored double digits easily in this game. Bryce Miller had okay stuff, not his best stuff. Definitely keeps you in the lead there as he exits with his 5 2/3, 6 hits, 2 earned, only 3 runs. Because whatever, like, he pitched fine. That game, I'm not super concerned about Bryce Miller's starts compared to how some of the rest of this series ended up going. In hindsight, the bullpen did its job, I think, in the first game. It was a little shaky here and there. Trent Thornton, obviously the hit batters, trying to keep it a little bit closer than maybe we wanted, and Munoz then has to come in and save the day for a 5-out save. This Guardians team, I think, showed in the second half of this game what was to come in the second and third game, that they're able to claw back. They're able to fight back. They're first in the AL Central for a reason, Colton. And I just wish that this game meant more for the Mariners for the rest of the series as well, though.
Yeah, I mean, the offense, this is the only game in this series where the offense didn't just mail it in. You know what I mean? Like, they had 11 hits, and they had 8 hits the rest of the series in the next 2 games. Plain and simple. The offense was great in this game, and it was terrible in the second 2 games. You can kind of chalk some of it up to Tanner Bybee in the second game, but game 3, no idea. We talk about the offense in this game. JP went 2 for 3, had 3 RBIs and 2 walks. Josh Rojas went 2 for 5. Cal Raleigh 1 for 5. Luke Raley 2 for 5. We'll talk a little bit more about him soon. 2 for 5 with 2 RBI for Mitch Garver. So overall, Joe. Oh, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Dylan Moore, who went 2 for 4, scored 3 runs, and hit a home run as well in this game. So, you know, you look at how good the offense was in this game, able to get to that Guardians bullpen early, you're feeling pretty good about the rest of the series, because while they didn't use Clase in this game, they used a lot of their higher leverage guys. And going into game 2 against Tanner Bybee, you know that if you can get him out of the game early, Joe, that you should be in a good spot with that bullpen. Unfortunately, that just wasn't the case.
Yeah, big fan of Tanner Bibby, not a big fan of Tanner Bybee, however. News to me, that's how you pronounce his name. Set a career high in strikeouts and back-to-back starts. This one happens to be against our Seattle Mariners, which I think, do so well. give opposing starting pitchers their career high in strikeouts. It's becoming a little old, so other teams maybe just stop. If you could stop, that would be great. Just don't, guys. 6 innings, 3 hits, 1 walk, 12 Ks for Tanner Bybee in this game. Brian Wu, it's his first start since his little injury scare. Not his best stuff, but not like keeping you out of the game. You're within striking distance. It's only 3 runs. Yes, 3 runs against Tanner Bybee in this game seemed basically impossible, but they showed in the first game that they could, in theory, do some damage, but that damage just never came in this one. 0 for 5 in runners in scoring position. Only 4 left on base because the Mariners only amassed 3 hits the entire game. Only 2 walks. Just not a lot of traffic on the bases. Mike Baumann has a pretty poor relief outing in this one. But also the home plate umpire
was Doug Eddings.
Doug Eddings. Yeah. Bad umpiring. really, really rough. At the end of this game, JP gets tossed on a strike 3 call. Scott Service gets tossed as well. Just kind of like the full sentiment of this game of just kind of shouting into the void about a strike 3 call when you're down 8-0. Like, what else are you supposed to do? Just try and get fired up some way, somehow, and try and get some momentum going into the third game, because this one, there's really nothing positive, I think, to take away from the second game. It was just an 8-0 loss is an absolute rinse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we could complain about, Mike Baumann in the bullpen or Cody Bolton. I mean, all the pitchers gave up some sort of run.
Mm-hmm.
And Brian Wu, only 4 innings pitched, 4 hits, 3 earned. Doesn't matter. It does not matter because the offense didn't do anything. So Brian Wu could have had a complete game, giving up 1 run, you lose.
Mm-hmm.
So doesn't matter. With that being said, Brian Wu was kind of pulled from the start a little bit early. I don't remember the exact verbiage, but saying he didn't feel, I think it was something about how he didn't feel great in that outing. And so we're like, okay, like, great. This is his first outing since he didn't feel great before.
Yeah.
And what does that mean for the future of this team in the number 5 starter spot? We'll talk about that here in a little bit as well, because Emerson Hancock in the same night also came out of the game down in Tacoma early with some sort of injury. At the time of recording this, it is undisclosed what that injury is. Moving on now to game 3, Joe. I don't know if I've been more frustrated watching a baseball game this year than this one specifically. Got off to an amazing start against Logan Allen, a walk from JP Crawford. Very first pitch of the game, Joe. I don't know if you saw it since you were at work. Very first pitch of the game in the basic same spot that got JP tossed yesterday.
Was called a strike?
No, it's called a ball.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's
good.
At least it was called a ball today.
Very first pitch of the game. So a walk from JP, a homer from Dylan Moore, a single from Julio, and you're feeling good. And then you get Garver up there, and he's in a 3-1 count, and he grounds out into a double play. This set the tone for the rest of this game. Joe, I also forgot to mention, shout out to Jage for sending JP a pizza.
Correct.
Just kind of the running tradition of guys getting tossed. Obviously started with Sophie Ballgame back when the Jesse Winker brawl against the Angels. She sent him a pizza. So yeah, nice to see that tradition continuing, Joe.
It was a fun, positive note to kind of, if we were to ever polish a turd, that's the one that would do it, because yesterday was just filled with just bad news in general. It felt like bad vibes. Game 3 apparently got off to really good vibes. I didn't get to watch a single pitch, unfortunately, as I was at work, but
not unfortunately. No, you're happy you missed
maybe it. If I was watching, I would have been the good luck charm. Just throwing it out there. Just trying to play a little superstition here. I'm feeling a little stitious today. Logan Allen, I felt good about this matchup specifically, and Castillo just did not have his best stuff. It is his first time, I think, being caught by Garver. Whether that has much to do with how this outing went, it could be. And I don't want to point fingers necessarily right now, because it is the first one. Things can turn around pretty quickly with guys that are, I think, of that caliber. We know what Castillo can do. He just hasn't always had it every single night out. And today, against a very tough Guardians team, it's just, what are you to do? And a tweet from Mariner Muse got me thinking about this start specifically. So this tweet says Mitch Garver has Luis Castillo much more changeup heavy today than usual in his first time catching him. Castillo is at 14% changeups for the season and 29% today, while also at just 31% on his four seam, which Castillo usually throws about 46% of the time. When I talked about Garver, who would be a better fit maybe for him as the secondary guy that he's going to catch. We mentioned Brian Wu, but I kind of mentioned Castillo. Sure, he can be a little erratic, got a lot of movement, but he is pretty fastball heavy. Interesting that they go changeup heavy, especially against the Guardians, and especially when Castillo's changeup hasn't been good since 2021. It's a very weird scenario. I don't know fully what to make of it. That could change. That like this could just be an outlier situation. And this is also super dependent on me understanding a stat, an analytical stat that I just learned about, really like figuring out what it is today. It's a sabermetric stat. It's weighted. It's just like teams like weighted runs against a specific pitch, essentially. Okay. Fastball runs above average. Cleveland Guardians on the year in 2024 are at a negative 1.1. That's a negative run value. That means they're not great against it. For reference, the Mariners were at like a negative 60 against sliders in 2023. Just for reference, if we're having war flashbacks about Teo swinging at sliders in the opponent's batter's box, a negative 1.1. It's like probably pretty close to average. If the average is 0, I'm assuming. The changeup is the Guardians' pitch that they hit the best, a 10.5 in that number for weighted like changeup runs above average. So why were we changeup heavy? Is that the thing that breaks this start completely open? I'm not going to say it is, but it's just a weird, not like coincidence, but like why? And I'm just confused. So is it Garver's first time with him? Maybe that's causing some problems. I don't know. But I know Garver's been in every single catcher's meeting. He's there putting in the work for it. So it's curious that a 5-inning, 8-hit, 5 earned, 2 walk, 4K line for Castillo is how this Mariners team kind of goes out, because the Mariners only scored 3. As soon as Castillo gives up more than that third run, it's toast. Will Brennan had everyone's number today, so that was really sick. It's just I can, looking at the box score, Colton, I can just see that it's pretty frustrating.
Yeah, I want to touch on that a little bit in terms of the changeup, because I would assume that it's not Garver. I would assume that this was the Mariners' plan going into this game with Luis Castillo. It wasn't just a Mitch Garver thing. I was assuming this was a full-on pitching staff plan, and it didn't work. Sometimes you're like, oh, well, they hit really well against this pitch, so they would think we're not going to go to it. Haha. Just really trying to play 4D chess, and it just doesn't work out.
Yeah.
In the end, Luis Castillo was not sharp, period. Like he walked 2, his changeup was in the middle of the plate the whole game. Andres Jimenez hit a 2-run home run, my guy.
Oh God.
So yeah, he's back, baby. Steven Kwan struck out. He can
do that.
He had the longest amount of plate appearances in between strikeouts in baseball, and he struck out. So let's go. He has 15 strikeouts on the year.
Put that on that banner that Joe Vieira always like changes, like the struck out Steven Kwan in 2024.
Yeah. Another part of this game that was just really frustrating to watch, because yes, they should have gotten to Logan Allen. They should have. There was a moment where they had Dylan Moore up to batting in the 2-hole. Runners on first and second, 1 out. Well, actually, even before that, runners on first and second, no outs, and JP doesn't advance the runners. He just has a little lazy pop up to the outfield. As the leadoff hitter, you have to find a way to advance those runners.
That was against Tim Herron, right? The lefty,
I believe so.
And then they switched to a righty.
And so that was a failure by JP Crawford. They switched to a righty. A right-handed pitcher comes in to face Dylan Moore, and instead of going to Josh Rojas, Luke Raley, or Dom Canzone in that spot, Scott decides to stick with Dylan Moore. Albeit Dylan Moore was hitting the ball hard in this game. Obviously, he had that massive home run. But how do you not go to Luke Raley, who has been one of your best hitters versus right-handed pitching in this spot? It doesn't make any sense to me. Or even Josh Rojas, who has been great for the most of the season.
Yeah.
Like, we talk so much about how Scott loves to play platoons and whatnot. And then in a big moment like that, he doesn't. And that part just made no sense to me as to why Dylan Moore was even in that spot to begin with. In the end, it probably doesn't matter. I mean, Luke Raley could have grounded into a double play just as easily, and that would have been that. But it's just little things like that that seem so predictable. Like, this is what should happen, and it doesn't. That kind of irked me about this game.
Mm.
And that was the inning, Joe. That was the 7th where I watched that ground into it all play, and I said nope, and I took a nap for the next couple of innings.
Took a little sleepy bye for the rest
A
of the
little
day.
little sleepy bye. I'm like, I'm done. Nope, this team, the offense mailed it in. It was bad. And so overall, you lost the series to the Cleveland Guardians. This has bigger impact, however, Joe, on the fact that if the Mariners and Guardians are tied at the end of the year, both winning their division, the Guardians would get the 2 spot.
Yep.
And they would get the bye, whereas the Mariners would get the 3 spot. The only way to make this not matter the rest of the way, because it's obviously it's June. So the only way to make this not matter, play better baseball than them and have a better record at the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And then nobody will ever remember this. But for right now, the implications, it sucks. Because we know how close Mariners are in the standings to a lot of these teams all the time.
Yeah.
If you play better baseball than the Guardians the rest of the way, finish with a better record than them, it does not matter. And so for the Mariners, they need to go out there and make maybe a move or two, Joe, to make sure that they can be ahead of the Guardians. Because, I mean, they only won 2 games against this team. With that being said, the upcoming trade deadline, Joe, is going to get a little, it's going to have to have a change of plans, in my opinion, simply because the Mariners starting pitching depth is nearly non-existent.
Yeah, the quality of arms you have behind Wu. Hancock, been serviceable. Jonathan Diaz saw a start, was serviceable, but that seems like it's a few and far between, an isolated incident. You don't want to have to potentially run them out for 6, 7, 8 starts consecutively when you're in the thick of the playoff race in the summer. And you mentioned Brian Wu's comments post-game about how he just wasn't feeling great going into the start, which is not something you want to see because he's a guy that's had that injury concern surrounding him. And there was a follow-up conversation to this. I think Jude tweeted about it. He said, followed up with Brian Wu this morning, said he's feeling just fine physically and he's going through his normal day after throwing routine on the field right now. And then parentheses, I think he was just pissed off in general last night and was particularly clipped during his post-game interview, close parentheses, end quote. It's a similar situation, I think, to not as severe, but Kirby last year where he was like, I don't know why I was out there for the 7th. And then the next day was like, hey, my bad, guys. Brian Wu was probably just pissed off that he didn't have his best stuff. And he was like, I wasn't feeling good. Not like making excuses, but like, I can understand that. I hope that is teetering on the more positive note about how Brian Wu's feeling. But Emerson Hancock, no news about that. Just threw a pitch, kind of motioned to the trainers and was like, yep, take me out. So that's never a good sign. And there are options that the Mariners can kind of address this with, especially with Wu's concern, I think, overall, just like innings limit, arm fatigue and stuff, like potentially going out and adding an arm in the deadline doesn't have to be the premier arms that are going to be traded around like you see get moved during like that time, but a more like lower end, a number 5 that's available like on a bad team. Like, yeah, I'm not saying go out and get Chris Flexen. It could be an option. It's not going to be a fun one for a lot of people. There are definitely better options that they can go do and definitely solidify themselves at making a run at trying to chase down the Guardians or keep their lead in the division, Colton. But adding a starting pitcher is, depending on the Emerson Hancock news, looking more and more like a possibility during this deadline. I hope it doesn't change their direction of trying to maybe definitely add a bat or 2. And maybe they switch up what they're doing with Logan Evans. Maybe they're like, okay, yep, we thought we might need you as a reliever. Okay, back to the rotation, because that's an option as well. But do you have some names in your head about who could be a target for them as far as starting pitching is concerned?
Yeah, so before I get into that part specifically, let me just say that the reason that I think the Mariners do need to go out there and get a starting pitcher, even if Brian Wu is okay, but we can't keep playing this game.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we can't keep doing this. Oh, I can't go today. I can only go 60 pitches today. No, all right, we can't. This is a team in the middle of a playoff hunt. If Brian Wu is not 100%, put him on the IL until the end of the season and let him get healthy because he is dominant. And when you get to the playoffs, if he's healthy and you can put him in the bullpen, he'd probably be great in the bullpen. And so yeah. I think that I would much rather them go out there and get somebody to let Brian Wu get healthy instead of having Brian Wu just not be able to go and have to play this mix and match game every week or so. to do this. And it's important because the Mariners are built on pitching. We know this. The offense sucks. And because of that, they need to go out there, and you can't lose your number 5 and then call up Jonathan Diaz and say, okay, he's our number 5 now, because he's not good. He's not a great pitcher, and he's not a guy that you should have fill in for Brian Wu. So then every 5th day, you just got to mail it in. I've used mail it in a lot this podcast. I do need to go to the post office.
I think you've only used it twice.
I think that was my 3rd time.
Either way,
you'll find out in the editing process.
Yeah, 3 times in like 20 minutes. Like, you're doing all right.
That's a lot. I also tweeted it today, so
it's on the mind.
It's on the mind, yeah. So I think that because of that, going out and getting a guy like Luis Severino makes sense if the Mets do end up selling. Obviously, we don't know yet. Other guys that I feel like could make sense. I mean, I don't think you need to go as high as Eric Fetty. Like,
sure.
Don't get me wrong, I would be totally cool with that, but I don't think you need to shoot that high. I mean, even someone like Jesus Luzardo, who we're going to see in this upcoming Marlins series, like if they can get things figured out with him, he's a guy that makes sense as well.
Do you think Fetty is higher than Luzardo in terms of value?
Yes.
Interesting.
Personally.
Even with control involved, like, yeah, you got Fetty for a year and a half. I think Luzardo, a lot of people would probably value Luzardo more given his track record outside of this year. He's been pretty rough this year, admittedly, and that's probably why maybe there's a sour taste for him for you right now. I think, if anything, Fetty and Luzardo, I would still think it would probably cost more to get Luzardo just based around like the control aspect. It's definitely, I think, lower than those two for sure. I don't know if it's, I mean, I've talked about JP Sears about 1 billion times trying to see if that's something out there in the cards. Maybe now's the time. A name that was brought up when we recorded something the other day, Jack Flaherty, could be an option. I don't know if I love it.
I'd love that.
Would you actually?
I've always really liked Jack Flaherty, especially when he came up as a rookie with the Cardinals. I'm like, yeah, that guy's going to be good.
That guy shoves. I think he's on a $14 million contract, so Mariners owe him 7. I feel like that's not super far out of the possibility with, like, given what was kind of said about where they'd be at spending wise, especially towards the end of the year. They're going to go a little bit over where they're at currently, hovering around like 140 million. If Flaherty, you might even be able to just get the Tigers to pay down half of it or something, because the Tigers, they're not living up to as much expectations as I wanted them to. Spencer Torkelson's not really doing it.
He got sent down.
He did. But Riley Green's having a great year. So that's my one thing I'll stand tall on. But Flaherty could be an option, I think, would provide veteran presence as well as along with, I think, postseason. Not a ton of postseason experience, but he's been there. I mean, he got traded to the Orioles last year. The Orioles felt that they needed pitching. They brought him in. I mean, it didn't go super well with the Orioles in the playoffs, but I think a surrounding cast of Castillo, Kirby, Gilbert, having Flaherty as like a 4th option for you in the postseason to maybe go like halvesies with Bryce Miller in a situation like, little curly fries, little regular fries, like you're in a Jack in the Box munchie meal. You know what I mean? Bryce Miller's the curly fries because the hair. That's where I could see Flaherty potentially fitting in, but I don't know if they'd be into it with how expensive he might be as far as just like contract. I don't think it'd be a ton to go out and trade for him because he's only a half-year rental, but that was a name that I thought of when I saw Hancock and Woo's stuff from yesterday.
Yeah, I think that the other option is one that you did mention already, and that's Logan Evans. And saying, oh, well, sorry, we're scrapping this whole reliever idea. In the scenario that is the case, and they do decide to go Evans back to a starter, just because you need the depth right now, it's a lot easier to acquire a reliever. Yeah. So maybe that's what they go and do. But don't get me wrong, that means you still need to go out there and get a reliever. But there are options to fill into this spot, and this is more of a precautionary thing. So I don't think you need to be reactionary and go out there and get somebody right this very second.
Yeah.
But if you're able to go out there and add somebody, even if they're in AAA, somebody, just so in the event that Brian Wu, this continues, because it's been 2 or 3 times through the rotation now. Obviously, it happened earlier in the year as well, that this has become a problem. And you can't just keep killing your bullpen because Wu can only throw 60 pitches. You can't have we don't know. We might have to readjust the rotation. It worked out last week because you got to readjust the rotation in favor of what it would be against the Rangers. That worked out. So I don't know. I don't know what the plan is moving forward for Brian Wu. And with Emerson Hancock potentially going on the shelf, you have Dallas Keuchel
Woo.
and you have Jonathan Diaz and a whole lot of nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that because of that, it makes sense for the Mariners to go out there and make a move sooner rather than later. Coming into a series against one of the worst teams in baseball, Joe, in the Miami Marlins. We're going to see a lot of left-handed pitching, and this is a Marlins team that is going to be selling throughout the rest of this year. But there are guys on this team that make sense even for the Mariners.
Yeah, if you're, say, interested in a reliever, there's two that people are probably pretty high on the Mariners acquiring. Tanner Scott, Andrew Nardi, both lefties, been very good for them. And even though we're going to be seeing a lot of lefties, it's not really a ton of quality left-handed pitching, at least on the year so far. All three starters in this series that we're facing all have ERAs at 5 or above. So you have to feel good in terms of the quality of opponent that you're coming into play. And yes, did the Mariners look exceptional against the White Sox? No. They still took 3 out of 4. I've got very high hopes of a series win here pretty safely. You've got, I think, 2 out of 3, maybe even your 3 best pitchers, at least through this last turn of the rotation. In Kirby on the first game, Gilbert in the second game, Miller in the third. There's not a lot to like for Miami in general, right? They've already traded Luis Ariz. The conversations about them selling have been happening since basically the beginning of the year when they started 0-9 or whatever they started. Currently putting up a 4.66 ERA, team ERA on the year. It's 27th in all of baseball. And as far as hitting is concerned, you expected maybe Jake Berger to have a better year, maybe some of the outfielders to continue to have better years like Brian De La Cruz. Jesus Sanchez, I think, has a WRC plus below 100. They are the second worst offense in all of baseball by WRC plus at 80, just ahead of the Chicago White Sox at 78. This is, Colton, as they say in the business, a bad baseball team. With George Kirby on the mound putting up a 3.54 ERA on the year, 84 Ks, a 6-5 record, he looks, I think you have to look to him going 7-5, dipping that ERA below 3.5, definitely getting himself back on the right track. I think back-to-back starts been pretty solid for him just in general. I can't say for certain if he's still on the third base side of the rubber, but that was a conversation when he struggled. Then the next start he was good. He was pitching on the third base side of the rubber. Hopefully that's continuing for him. But this Marlins team, Colton, there's not a whole lot I think to be intimidated by. Like, go out there, win the series.
Yeah, and against Trevor Rogers, I mean, you'll have the right-handed lineup in again. This will be, if everything stays the same, 4 lefties you face in a row.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan Bliss looked really good today at the plate. He lined out to left field, also smashed a double to left field as well. And so I think that he's a guy you're definitely
life.
Yeah, so because when you get back, so this is something that Goldsmith talked about. When you get back to Seattle, one of Locklear or Bliss is going to go down for Jorge Polanco.
Mm-hmm.
It's just what's going to happen. And that's fine. But I think that this is going to be kind of their last hurrah in the major leagues for now. They'll be back. But for now, both of these guys have been more than serviceable at the big league level. Ryan Bliss has struggled a little bit lately. Locklear is definitely looking a little overmatched here and there. And so I think because of that, we're going to see both of them in this game, I would assume. We might see Ty France with Locklear on the bench ready to pinch it. But interesting to note that Garver caught today.
Mm-hmm.
He has been catching exclusively George Kirby up until today.
Yeah.
So do we see him behind the plate again in this game? I doubt it. Like with a Cal DH day, I don't know. But I would assume that we do see him in the game no matter what against a lefty. You'll have Mitch Haniger in right field. You'll have Dylan Moore over there, probably at third base. Ryan Bliss at second. Victor Robles probably in there in left field as well. He's looked really good. And so, yeah, the only lefty in your lineup is probably going to be a very similar lineup that we saw in the third game against Cleveland, with the only lefty being J.P. Crawford.
I'll be interested to see if they do put Garver behind the dish, because it's worked well for Kirby. I think it's worked well for Garver in that respect as well. It's a day game going into a night game. So maybe that it's an extra, say, 8 hours of rest, and maybe Garver gives them the okay. I'll be okay with it. It is starting to get like a little scary area because of Garver's injury history, but whatever works.
Yeah, I mean, he's the backup catcher now,
Mm-hmm.
so
Just
you're
how
gonna have to play him like one.
that's how it has to be.
Hmm.
But if he
And
does go back to back games, there's no way he's facing Jesus Luzardo.
right,
Like
at least not behind the plate. He might still DH.
that's a lot of games in a row.
It is. They probably put Mitch Haniger at DH that game.
Yeah, and I think you could put Luke Rayleigh in there, or
Yeah.
maybe they go. Oh, do they do something crazy and put like Locklear at third and go Dylan Moore in the outfield?
No.
Ty France at third, and Dylan Moore in the
No.
outfield. Get real crazy with it. Get both the ties in the lineup. I mean, yeah,
No.
at that point you probably just rather have Luke Rayleigh in there if you need to play
Yeah.
a lefty, because going 4 lefties in a row, those guys that are in that lineup like Haniger and Garver, they're not going to go 4 games in a row very often. It's pretty, I don't know. I think it's kind of, unless it's early season 2024 Mariners just trying to run Mitch Haniger into the ground. I think that's a different situation. A lot of the lineups will definitely be interesting this series, but Gilbert against Luzardo, definitely the best pitching matchup as far as like I think pure stuff is concerned in this series. Gilbert's having a great year, looking to could be a Mariners All-Star representative. Did well
Should
in
be.
his last time out, very well. Luzardo, very up and down year, a ERA of 5, maybe making his audition here. How can he match up against another guy on the mound having a great year? How does he go toe to toe against Logan Gilbert? This is a game that is, if it's vintage Luzardo, if it's Luzardo at his best, will be a tough one for Seattle.
And I think that because of that, you're going to have to look to the big guys in this lineup. You're going to have to look to Julio. He needs to get it going again. He's been so hot and cold this year. He's returning to the scene of the crime where he hit his first major league home run back in Lone Depot Park. And I think that Julio, this is a good chance for him to get it going against 3 lefties. Mitch Garver needs to get it going again. All these guys need to get it going again because the offense has been pretty bad over the past week or so. Obviously, there are guys like Ty France has come back and looked pretty good. He's walked a lot. He got hit again today.
Mm-hmm.
But I look for this to be a get it right series because they played against a very good baseball team in the Cleveland Guardians. Again, you lost the series. I'm not too upset about it. I'm not. Like, it sucks. I'm upset about game 3 specifically.
Yeah.
But losing the series as a whole, it is what it is. I mean, it's almost to be expected against a team as good as the Guardians. You need and should win this series versus the Marlins, because if you don't, I mean, the Astros just won the series versus the White Sox. Tough, I know. The Rangers, I Bleav, won the series, or at least won the last game versus the Mets. And the Astros are going in to face Baltimore. Baltimore's going there. So they have a tough series ahead of them as well. I mean, it's June, but we got to start looking at these things.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the Mariners offense, if they can get it going in this series, going into game 3 against Braxton Garrett, which sucks that he's been so bad because I really had high hopes for Braxton Garrett. I think that there is a chance, Joe. I'm going to say it. It's hard to sweep in baseball, but this is a bad baseball team.
Yeah, you've got Miller on the mound. Not his best against Cleveland, but like it's Cleveland. Him going up against the Marlins, it should be night and day. Like the quality of opponent that he's facing, I would say. Like from top to bottom, the lineups, how they're constructed. And you have to look to take advantage of that. As far as ERA is concerned between starting pitching and relief pitching, the Marlins relievers, obviously credit to Tanner Scott and Andrew Nardi, I think they were like 19th in baseball as far as their ERA is concerned from a reliever standpoint. Bottom of the barrel, like bottom, I think 3 in terms of starting pitching, just ERA. Get to the starters early. You do not want to finish out a game, have to try and scrape a run across against Nardi or Scott.
Mm-hmm.
Get to them early.
Yeah, and if you can get to those starting pitchers again, like you said, and attack that bullpen, you're setting yourself up for a good next couple games in the series as well, because then they know their starters have to go long. And I think that the Mariners' game plan has always been to really work the pitch count on the starter and get to the bullpen, but you might want to just get on these guys quick and just come out swinging like they did against Logan Allen, because it looked like they were going to just pound Logan Allen into the ground. and they let him go like 6.
Mm-hmm.
The offense mailed it in. And so I think that going into this series, Joe, it's going to be really important for the offense to get it going. But that is going to do it for episode 97 of the Hit It Here podcast, presented by Bet Online, the dingus episode of the podcast. And go Mariners.